550. We're bigger than this, right? Right? Come on. We got numbers. This is a Microsoft Tower. One last thing. Who wants to talk about job openings? All right. I got one here in the front. You got one? DBA, what level?
It's in
Level DBA, the health in there. Good, sure, I don't have that. Okay. Where was that? Health Street has an SSRS position open? And one more, that boy's a good day for jobs.
Aspect software favor.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Dixon Resources has a senior server VA.
Anybody looking for a job and want to see another rinse their boss finding out? Anybody? Developers, ETL, database started. All right, there you go. Today we have Joe Murphree. He's going to talk to us about the DBA's role in the cloud. So big buzzwords, right?
That's the big buzzword, the marketing word.
Huh? I'm getting heckled. Anything else you want me to tell him?
I think that's
All right,
Listen.
good.
welcome. Appreciate everybody coming out today. Let me get this mic. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joe Murphree, Senior Database Administrator at Value Payment Systems, and been there since February. Before that, I was a Senior DBA Manager and Senior DBA at HealthSpring. And so decided to take a shift and move over to a different role. And a little bit about me, other than that, is step away from that mic. As I started at DPS, the Value Payment Systems for short, one of the things that they were challenged with was creating a data warehouse. And as a smaller company, setting up a data warehouse is not something that you just step into lightly. Obviously, if you've ever done it before, it's costly, and there's a lot of hardware and things that you got to spec out. So one of the things that they started to look into was going to the cloud, and in particular, Amazon's Redshift, which is their data warehouse. Now, I'll admit, prior to that, I had not paid very much attention to the cloud. I've heard the buzzwords, I've heard the talk, I've read a few articles here and there, but to be honest, I had not really taken it that serious. Not unlike some of the other companies, how they've kind of not taken iPads and iPhones very seriously, and they were playing catch-up. Well, so I felt like I needed to play catch-up at this point. So I started doing some research. I looked at two of the major companies, Amazon and Microsoft, that are in those spaces, and started setting up databases and working through the issues, and that's why I'm here today, because I wanted to share that with any of you that may not have done that up until now. So a couple of questions. One is anybody right now fully, and when I say cloud services, I'm going to kind of define this a little bit. There's the cloud services, which is in general, and then there's the database as a cloud, as a service. So I'm asking in general, is anybody here, their company's fully on the cloud right now? Got one so far. All right. And two. And are there any companies that are any companies that are going to go fully onto the cloud in the near future? Got one there. Okay. Interesting. My objectives here today is really just to give those of you who are not using it an introduction to this, and then maybe if some of you are using it, you've not seen one of the vendors or one of the other, and you may get a little bit of exposure to that. And so this is just going to be basic information. I apologize if anybody was expecting something really in-depth here, but kind of my other goal here is I would like to see more of these sessions at the National Users Group on the cloud, so that maybe this might be a precursor to getting into deeper and deeper discussions on it. And then I'm also going to kind of give you my idea or my opinions on where I think this landscape's going. I mean, the overall class is about the DBA role, but it really does have a larger impact on everyone, I think. And then I'm also going to give you a little bit of a starter on how to get set up with Azure or the Amazon Services Relational Database Service, or RDS for short. And then my last objective is not to scare anyone. I'll be honest though, I was a little nervous at first. When I first thought about this and thought about, wow, what could this become, I kind of thought, well, where's the DBA role going? You know, is this going to be time for me to shift into something else? Okay. Current state of cloud computing. Who thinks that more than 50% of the companies will be using, and I'm talking now, database as a service in the next 10 years? Got one so far. Two. What about in the next 5 years? Okay, well, yeah, kind of. All right. And I'll explain my questions here in a few minutes, but I'm just kind of curious to see what people think. Okay, so right now, this is, I didn't date this one, but I think this was from 2012. Forbes had reported over 50% of the U.S. companies, and I apologize, I'm kind of switching back and forth here, but this is cloud-based services in general. Over 50% of the U.S. companies use cloud computing in some form or fashion. And then CNBC reported in 2012, 8 out of 10 companies use some form of the cloud services. More than one-half plan to increase by 10% over the next year. More than 50% of the businesses, this is what I find interesting, with 1 to 99 employees use cloud-based apps. Nearly 1/3, or 28% of the micro and small businesses are currently using infrastructure as a service. When I'm talking about the database as a service, that's kind of also in tandem with infrastructure as a service. And I'll show you a chart here in a minute that has a nice breakdown of that. So what companies or types of companies are using cloud services? Basically all industry. I hesitate to say all, but I would say it's many. There's in some form or fashion we're probably using the cloud, whether it's just storage or sharing files or something like that, you're using the cloud. And then all size companies are using it in some degree. Reasons for and against. The biggest thing that I can think of is reducing costs. You know, if the executives of a company is sitting there having this conversation about how do we reduce costs now, they're looking at their budgets and the amount of money they're spending on data centers, storage, SAN, you know, large replication and clustering, geo-clustering. So data centers, cooling, electrical hardware licensing, generator fuel, and I hate to say it, but FTEs. We've got a supply and demand problem. We just talked about it a few minutes ago. And what happens when there's not enough supply to meet demand? Well, the cost goes up. We all know this, but that's what's happening in IT. So when they're looking at how do we reduce costs, they're looking at FTE costs too. Unless they can fill this gap with more knowledgeable people and keep the cost in check, it's going to change. That's just my opinion, but that's what I think will happen. The other is high availability without the overhead and cost of support. Kind of leads back into cost, but I did separate it because with infrastructure as a service and database as a service, you have this built-in redundancy and high availability that you don't have to set up. You don't have to manage it. It's all managed for you. Against, this is the biggest one I've heard. I did read a couple of articles when I was doing some research for this session, where people are saying that's no longer the biggest concern. Does anybody disagree with that? Is this the biggest concern of people going? I mean, I see some people shaking their heads, yes. So Data security. I did look, and again, this is new to me as well, so I could have missed something, but I could not find anywhere either, and this is, we're talking with Microsoft SQL Server, on Amazon or on Azure, where I could encrypt fields or columns or the database itself. And if anybody knows different, please, let me know. But so that's a big problem. The other thing is, behind the scenes, I put access to data files. They're shifting this data around. You have to kind of get out of the concept that you're in an instance of SQL sitting on one server over here. That's different now. That model's changed. Your database can be flipped from one site to another site, and you not even know what happened. Okay? The data files are still sitting there, though. Does that mean, if anybody's ever done this, you can open up a data file in Notepad and read the text, the clear text right out of it, right? Who's to say they can't do that, or that somebody, and we won't go into full NSA stuff because we've all heard enough about that, but that somebody couldn't go in and get access to that information. So that is a big issue, if you ask me. And then lack of control over custom settings. As I started getting into this and looking at the different options and what I can and can no longer do in SQL, there's some things that you no longer have ability to change and control over. You may not need it, but that's just something that you have to be aware of. This is a good graphic right here, and I'm giving credit to Kevin. I don't know if everybody can see it. I was kind of hoping we could zoom in. I think I can. If you bear with me. Of course, the zoom's not working. Anyway, if you can kind of make out, it doesn't matter if you can't see it completely, but it just goes, there's an on-premises on the far left-hand side, and it's basically saying you own everything. You deal with the hardware, the software, and then there's the next one to the right is infrastructure, and you can see the blue and the gray. The gray is what the vendor is taking care of. The blue is what you would be taking care of. And then the one we're talking about is, I apologize, I said earlier that we're talking about infrastructure. We're actually going to be talking about platform as a service when we're talking about database as a service. My apologies. Platform as services is where you just manage the data and the application. Everything else below that is managed by the vendor. And that's including installation, acquisition of the software. All that is now handled by somebody else. So if you're a DBA now and you're accustomed to acquiring hardware, configuring it, installing an OS, installing SQL, if your company shifts over to this or even just one of your systems of it, you won't have that responsibility. And then, of course, the last one is software as a service. How cloud services differ, and what I'm referring to there is just kind of the differences between Microsoft's Azure and Amazon. Other players are coming into this field, so theirs may differ as well. But there is an implementation difference, and I'll show you that here in a little while. But Amazon and Microsoft have completely, I don't say completely, but the implementation of these is different. And you'll see what I mean shortly. Cost models are different, but they still are pay-as-you-go. I think Microsoft, I won't swear to this, but I believe they had changed their model. It was different before, but now it's kind of a pay-as-you-for-usage type model. Options within database configurations, I kind of talked about this a minute ago, and I'll show you some screenshots, but there's differences in what you can, of course I said there's some things that you can no longer change in the databases or on the server level, but there's also differences in what you can change with Microsoft, what you can change with Amazon. And then the website management tools, I'm sure there's more tools out there, but the primary ones that I'm using so far is just the web browser. When you connect to the service, they have built these interfaces on their websites that you can control this. Or you can use SQL Management Studio, which is really good for those of you who are familiar with that. So cloud service providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, and Google's, I put Google on here, kind of hesitated because as far as I know, they're not implementing SQL Server right now, and I know this tends to be more of a SQL Server group, but they are coming into it, and I got to imagine that if Amazon has been able to use SQL Server on their cloud services, Google may at some point offer it. This is what's telling, though, is I don't know if anybody saw this the other day, but Larry Ellison announced at a meeting that Oracle is now partnering with Microsoft a VP at Microsoft in the cloud services, or the guy over cloud services, went and met with Oracle, and I don't want to quote it, but it was something to the tune of, we're going to allow Oracle to run on our Azure platform. So to me, that tells you, and then they're also going to partner with Salesforce. I just put that in there as kind of a note, but I won't go into details on that. But that tells me right there that they fear Amazon, maybe not fear, but they see Amazon as a true competitor right now in this area. And the reason I say that is because Amazon offers Oracle, MySQL, and SQL Server, and then they have their database, which is Redshift. I mentioned that earlier. So just keep that in mind. So how much trouble is it going to be getting up and running? I put a little thing under the medicine child-proof caps. I feel like the biggest challenge I had was getting IE to work correctly with all of this. And by what I'm getting to there with the child-proof caps is it child-proofed it to the point where even adults, older adults, have trouble getting the bottle caps off. And I think that's what they've done with IE is they've locked it down so much that to do your regular work sometimes you just have to fight with it. Amazon uses Java, and Microsoft IE uses Silverlight. So if you don't have those, if you've got a server like I have that's locked down and Internet Explorer's locked down, you may have some challenges getting it to even connect to these systems and some of the pages refreshing or coming up. So just keep that in mind. How much will it cost me? So right now, Amazon has a 12-month intro, and you can create a database on there. I created the Express Edition database, so I didn't need a license. But if you have an MSDN kit, you can use your license in there, as far as I know. You get about. There's also in a cost breakdown, like with how many hours. So you get 750 hours, 20 gigs of storage, 10 million IOs, and 20 gigabytes of backup storage. And like I said, that's for 12 months. You do have to put your credit card in when you sign up. So if you do go over that or exceed that, they will charge you. So keep that in mind. And there's some hidden costs. I won't get too deep into that, but that was something that we kind of found out later is where you store your files for the import. If you leave those files there, even after you've imported them, you can be charged for that. So there's a charge, there's a cost. With Microsoft Azure, you can get a 1 month or $200 spending limit on their Azure site. So if you want to go on there, but here's the good news: if you're an MSDN customer, you have MSDN. I think you have to have professional enough. You can get. You basically are automatically entered in there. And what I was told, I didn't see this specifically. No, I did see this. I'm sorry. It's $50 a month is what you get, and that renews. So you don't want to go over that spending limit, but you can set up pretty much the database, and you can even do VMs and things like that in there as well. So, but when you do sign up, the first month you get the same as the trial, which is $200 a month. So just keep that in mind. All right. Setting up an account. So I'm going to go through and just do a quick little walkthrough of what it would look like. Let's see if this will look. Okay. So I'm going to do Azure, but I do have some screenshots from the Amazon just to kind of give you an idea of what their portal looks like as well. So I will kind of speed through this a little bit because I don't want to sit here and bore you with all the tedious stuff, and I did skip a lot of things. So, but there's some key points in here. One is this. I know you can't read that, so I'll read it to you, but it's basically when you sign up, it says, do I want to remove the spending limit or not? So if you're going to go, if you think you might want to go over $50, you're kind of ready to commit, then you may want to remove the spending limit. The catch here, I read this last night, is if you remove the spending limit, you cannot go back and reapply it again. I'm sure that's a bug in the software, right? So they'll have that fixed at some point. But once you remove it, just keep that in mind. And I'll show you in another screenshot. They've actually got right at the top here, the little green bar, it says current status. You can click on that at any given time. It tells you how much you've spent so far. And so then you can keep track of your spending costs. This is what the screen looks like. Again, I know, I apologize if this is a little small, but if I challenge you to go out and just sign up and go look at this and explore around in this window. But on the left-hand side is your navigation. About, what's that, 3, 4, 5, 6 down, you see SQL databases there. They've got all the other ones like websites, virtual machines, mobile services, all the way down to SQL reporting networks and so forth. So you've got a lot of stuff to explore there. They've got zeros below each one. Every time you add an instance of any of those, of course, that increments by 1. And this is, of course, the first screen you see. Down here, I didn't show, let's see if it'll back up a second. Okay. Down in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a plus sign with new. That's what you click on in order to create new objects or new databases. And that's what I'm going to do here is basically go, you can see on the first one there, I've hovered over just for viewing and compute. You can create websites, virtual machines, mobile services, and cloud service. I'm going to select database here, quick create, put in the name of the database, the server I want to do it, and I just select new SQL database server. And then I create what's going to be my, I'm putting quotes here, air quotes, the admin account. Okay, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. So now I've created the database. It takes a few minutes to create, and it's called MS Test, and I've highlighted it there. You would click on that little arrow, and it'll take you to this quick start screen. In the quick start screen, there are a couple things to note there. Across the top, you've got monitor, scale, and dashboard, so you can kind of click on those, and you'll see some nice little screens that will show you performance and how much usage. As you go down a little bit, you'll see you can install some design tools. You can also, one key thing that you need to know is under Design Your SQL Database, the second link there is set up your Windows Azure firewall rules. With both services, one of the key things that you need to know, and this is one of the things I struggled with because I started with Amazon's, is you've got to set up your IP address in order to connect. You've got to allow your IP address to connect to that database instance. Sometimes it's harder when you've got firewalls and other things like that to identify which IP they're talking about. Is it the one on my machine right now, or is it the one that it sees? But one thing they've gotten good about is at the bottom of the screen, if you look, or in Amazon's, it's a little just a lower window, it will show you the IP address it thinks you are. And so you can try that one. The one thing I would tell you about Amazon's is it has a slash, and you're supposed to put in the, I'm not an IP guy, so it's this little, the increment number or whatever they call it. Mine is always wrong. I think it shows 36. You get reminded that I put 24 in there. Don't worry if you don't get that, but you'll see that if you go set up an account. Down, also, this one's really obvious. Amazon's was not originally obvious. They've gone back and revamped their site a little bit. But the connection string down at the very bottom where it says server, and I kind of got it blacked out there, you want to note that because that's how, if you're going to use SQL management tools or any other tools like that that are not web-based, to connect to your database instance. So you can see the port number on there. Amazon's allows you to change your port number. I've not found yet if I can change the port number on this. And one thing I want to keep in mind is when I talk about Amazon, that's SQL Express. So if there's things I'm telling you you can't do with SQL Express, I haven't tried the other editions, so there may be some things that you can do in that environment. So make sure you know that. This is just a quick screenshot of once you enter in the database and if you want to create a table, this is what it looks like through the web interface. This was another one that got me. Okay, this Amazon's, and I'm kind of going back to that earlier when I was saying I was going to show some differences in how they work. Amazon's was quite clear how to create an account if I wanted to add another user to my database. Azure was actually a little more hidden to me. Some people may have gotten this, but I didn't. So once you kind of select it onto your database, there's a thing called Common Task, and at that point you want to actually click on Manage Server. It took me a while to find that. If you have trouble, go to, just Google it. It is on Google on how to do it, but that got me, slowed me down a little bit. This is something else I want to show you. I'm connected in this case with SQL management tools. This is to Azure. When you right-click on the users and click New Users, you won't get the normal modal window. I guess it's not modal anymore, but the pop-up window to add a user. It opens a text screen connection and puts the text in there for you. And then you go and replace the username, Marriott, for login, and all that. Just so you know that. It's a little bit more cumbersome now. Amazon's does not require. Amazon's will show you the normal Microsoft pop-up. And this is just where I've added this user. I basically changed the information you saw on the previous screen, and I said create user SQL user, and then I'm just adding that role as a data reader to that database. So you have to do, that's all your stuff you're going to have to do. The blue screens won't do it for you now. This is a comparison screen. I don't know if you can tell this again. If I can, let's see if I can zoom in on this. I'm just not sure I can do that. Okay. So I'll just explain it to you. But I have two connections here. The top connection is to Azure. The second connection is to Amazon. Kind of neat when you think about it. I'm actually connected to two different companies, two different cloud databases at the same time with one management studio. So it's kind of a neat concept, really. But I want you to notice a couple differences if you can, or at least I'll point them out to you. The first in the Object Explorer is the system databases. I only see master in Azure. But in Amazon, I see master model, MSDB, and TempDB. It's just something to note. Also, look at the security differences. Under logins, I only see the two accounts that I created, where under security logins for Amazon, I get to see all the other ones, including the RDSA, which is theirs. Also, Amazon has an RDS admin database on there that you have no control over. Microsoft's, there is no other database besides the ones you create. And I can explain a little bit about why you see some of these differences. The key one, though, that I thought was interesting was the temp database. Because one of the questions I've had in my mind is, do we no longer manage the temp database, especially with Azure? Does that mean I can create Cartesian products all day long and it's not going to be a big deal anymore? We'll let Microsoft worry about that. This form right here, the server properties window, is from Amazon's site. When you right-click onto Azure and try to get the properties window, you will not get a window. I forget what the message is. It tells you something about permissions or something. But you are not an SA on either one of these, but you can see this information here. I believe I went to try to change the max stop setting on Amazon, and it would not allow me to change it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's some things that I'm not sure if it's because of it's Express or because it's Amazon's locked down. But to the point, so SP_configure, you can run that on Amazon and get information back. You cannot run it on Azure. It will not run. I started digging around, even looking at other system tables. There's a lot of system tables that are system views, I guess they are calling that I couldn't get information back on. They're just not even there. They'll tell you it's not there. So just some interesting things to look at. This will kind of explain a lot of that. And again, if you can't see it, I did the select add version on Azure, and what I got back was Microsoft SQL Azure RTM. That explains some of the differences that I'm seeing between the two, because this is an actual different implementation of SQL. I don't know all the behind the scenes about it, but what they're reporting is definitely different than what you would see, and certainly different than what you see on Amazon's instance. Okay. This is Amazon's website portal and what it looks like. And they have instead of having that long list of all their different options in the navigation tree on the left, they actually have a menu that comes out from the top, or you can go to a different page, and it has all of their different services they offer, and you can drill in through that way. But once you're into the RDS, which is Relational Database Services, once you drill in, then you'll see your database instances. And there's the one I created. You can see it's SQL Server 11, and you see I've got 20 gigs of storage. That's a funny thing about that is they limit you to 20 gigs, but that's also the minimum you can have. So you basically only get that one instance. You can blow it away and create new ones, but that's the only one you get per test. You can see over here on the left-hand side, you've got some options that I didn't see in the Azure. One is creating snapshots. And the other is these security groups. If you see I've got test groups set up, that's the group that you will create. You can add in, what is that? I think that's your network. So that's where you're going to add your IP addresses in and so forth. So you can create a security group for those IP addresses that are allowed to get in. I think that's it for the scripts.
You can express in both.
Well, that's what I was saying, that in Azure, there's no option. It's Azure that you're getting when you set up a database. When you're on Amazon, you have the option of Express, Standard, Enterprise, and you can either use their license or you can bring your own. So, yeah.
Can you connect it? Is that integrated with Azure or is it,
Well, I can go back to that screen. There's a long string name, and then there's a port number at the end. I don't know if you saw that earlier. Yeah, that's what you'll actually put into your SQL Management Studio address, and then whatever account that you created when you created that database, that's your primary account. That's going to be your administrator account. All right. Now, again, you're not a true administrator. If you go and look, if you even can look, you won't see that you're an administrator. And I don't think I have it here, but I found a list that shows, if you'll go onto Microsoft's site, they've got some really good documentation on this. It'll show you what new, which T-SQL commands are no longer usable. A lot of them were to do with encryption, a lot of them were to do with grant denies on encryption certificates and things like that, service master keys. There were functions like the virtual file stats that's no longer available. So there's a lot of that stuff that you can't use anymore. So check out that help too. I think it's really neat to kind of just walk through there and see what, because this is again, it could be, it may not be, but I think it could be our new role. You know, and if you go back to that other screen where I was showing that we're using the services. Is it I still have platform as a service. Trouble remember that. You know, you're only talking applications and data. So, and within that, I don't know if these things will expand. I don't know if Microsoft's just slowly implementing some of this stuff, or if they're actually removing it for other reasons. So, because what it says is these are unsupported commands. It doesn't say they're deprecated. It doesn't say they don't work. It just says they're unsupported. So keep that in mind. Continuing tasks and things that we no longer have to worry about. So continuing tasks, I'll read through a couple of these. I don't want to waste too much time, but system performance tuning, code deployments, jumping around here a little bit, architecting databases. One that got me was advisory. You know, if you understand the cloud, you can be an advisor. If you don't, they may bring somebody in to advise them. You know, so think of it in those terms. Query tuning, that's still going to be huge. I mean, even though you may not have the opportunity to change, if you come from like larger companies where they actually have a SAN administrator, you're probably already kind of used to that model anyway, right? Because you're just going to them and telling them, hey, I'm down, I don't have enough IOPS to complete the queries in a reasonable amount of time, so I need more disks. And he goes back and figures out how many more disks you got to get or how many more. So that's kind of what this model is here. It's just you may be picking up the phone and calling Microsoft, right? Or Amazon. Exporting and importing, here's the neat thing. So I started looking at, so how do I back up these databases? Because I want to know who's backing up this stuff, right? Well, they'll tell you right off, so they say that there's really no need to back it up for this reason, and that is if there's equipment failure, hardware, that kind of stuff, they're taking care of that side. But you do need to back it up for if there's damage to data or something like that, right? Because that's our job, is to protect the data, right? So I did look into this. It's not as easy as you think. You don't right-click and go back up. And you don't create a job on that SQL server, because if anybody noticed, I don't know if I didn't point it out, but there is no SQL agent on either one of those services. So you don't create a job there. What Microsoft recommends is you create a job on your system somewhere that actually reaches across and does this. But you actually have to go through some different hoops now to back up a database. One is you actually have to create a copy. You do the create database as a copy. And so that's the first step, and then you actually export it to a, what they call it, a backpack, a BACPAC file. So you're actually going to have some storage allocated that you're probably going to pay a little bit for to store that backpack file. And then you can bring the backpack file to your site if you choose. So just keep that in mind. Things we're no longer going to have to worry about: provisioning servers, hardware, network. This is interesting. Placement of files or file groups, indexes, or tables. On Azure, you can't even get to that section to change placement of files or create file groups. On Amazon, I could get to it, but it would only allow me, it actually does show me a path. It's like on a D drive, and it has some path to where the files are stored. It actually allowed me to create a second file, but I couldn't create file groups and distribute those around to any other. There's no other drives available to move that. I put messing with MaxDOT, so if anybody's ever had to mess around with MaxDOT on a system that has a lot of cores, that's options gone. Cost threshold, server level, memory settings, I don't believe, and again, some of this could be because I'm using Express, but on Azure I didn't see where I could even change memory settings. Amazon, I wasn't able to. Same configurations, and then I put temp DB potentially because that's kind of an unknown in my opinion. So looking forward, I talked about the high cost of IT resources. Companies are always looking for an edge. And so if they feel like that this is a way, I'll give you an example. If you go to Microsoft's site, there's a neat little tool that you can do that has all these sliders on there, and you can provision or kind of estimate how much you're going to use of each of those. So if you want, so I did everything maxed out. I said I want as many servers as I can have, and I want the largest server I can have. I want as many this and that, and I did it all the way down. The total cost was a little over $500,000 per month. Sounds like a lot of money, but now here's the trick. Microsoft also has a couple options down there. If you do as a 6-month or a 12-month, it cuts the cost considerably. So if you did a 12-month, it went down to $300,000 and something a month. I don't know what all the IT budgets are in this room, but if you kind of look at that, even half of that expenditure to get rid of those data centers and how much they're paying and all the manpower to support for data centers and all that, somebody's going to start thinking about this. Again, this is not to try to sell people on the cloud services. It's just try to prepare DBAs for what the next step is in their careers. So be prepared for the future administration. It's probably going to change, at least some, or for some months. The other thing is even if your company never goes to the cloud, you don't want to prevent yourself from getting the job at the next company who's already full in, right? Company leaders, I've talked about that, and then how it can change our role. And that is it. Anybody have any questions or want to kind of discuss it? I did ask the question earlier about how many people thought that we might go, all in the next 5 or 10 years. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? You guys, you're using it all in right now.
The one thing that you might mention, what you look at is RDS services.
Yes.
Services. Also infrastructure is all SQL servers.
Yes.
A lot of the typical administration is still there.
That's perfect. And I'm glad you said that because I should have mentioned this earlier too. One of the things I found on Amazon's site is you can actually create a virtual private center on their site. So if you actually want to put the database behind a so-called I don't know if it's firewall as an example, but you can basically put it on the database on their own network, but it's one you create, you manage that network. So there's a lot of variations, and we have to be careful when we say, again, saying all in to the web or cloud is one thing, but actually going full implementation of all your databases on the cloud is different. So, anybody else have any comments or anything else on how you're using the cloud or thinking that your company may use it? I think you said your company's looking at it. Okay.
I think, Joe, did you see anything about now how to disperse these data centers?
So Amazon, I mentioned earlier about Netflix is really heavy. I read an article, a really interesting article about Jeff Bezos, not Netflix, Amazon, but how Netflix is using Amazon services. And that's what they distributed so that when you watch a movie, you're watching a movie from a location close to you. And it has an algorithm that they wrote. Matter of fact, Netflix is claiming that they've written a lot of the tools that Amazon's using. But I don't know if that answers your question, but...
So Netflix, so they're using Amazon?
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
I didn't look at me. Yeah, I don't know how many. Yeah, I don't know on the Azure yet how widespread they are. I do know that Amazon has several regions across the U.S. and when you sign up for the free account, I think they put you purposely over in Oregon. That's the only one that I have as an option for regions that you could choose. But yeah, I don't know if why that was, but I imagine when you go in and start getting that past the free stuff, you probably have a lot more choices in what you do.
Cloud or something like that, advising them we were understand moving it. Something like that. And there's several ways to do that. And one thing you want to think about if you're production, well, is especially on Amazon. A lot of the stuff we use is in the Northeast, but the Northeast region is already come down. So that's something to think about. Another option is, as Joe was mentioning, a virtual private cloud. Actually set that up, you can kind of corporate firewall, prevent public access to it, and you can replicate it to servers, to database servers, to virtual private cloud. For your applications, that's probably what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to database for private cloud. You're going to put a hole through that from your public side to your web servers. And that's only traffic that you're going to allow back to your database.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazon has a whole infrastructure.
And that's what, I think what may drive how quickly companies get to this is how fast these players get more options and provide some more security, of course. But that's what's really great. If they move quickly, then I think a lot of companies will start to get in and move quickly. And the last thing too I want to mention is I kind of got this thought in my head too is a lot of young companies right now are probably is a key word, but probably looking at this as an alternative to have to build out a data center. So those companies in 5 or 10 years, that was why I asked the question like that, was those companies in 5 or 10 years, if they're making multiple millions or billions of dollars, they're going to start getting looked at by the people who are running these other companies and saying, well, if they can do it, why can't we? So, just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Let's say we have say my company. Or vice versa. Let's say we have something. How easy is it to do
Yeah, I mean, there's actually several ways, but Jared actually had experience with that, so I'll let you kind of.
Yeah, we scripted yeah. So, we did Redshift early on. It's Netflix. Really fast, really impressive.
Yeah, So one of the things I did try while we were in that process was hooking SSIS up to upload. It took a long time to upload some records, but I don't know at the time because what we were pulling from was a slow system. It wasn't one of our larger systems, so I don't know if what piece of that was slowing us down. And this kind of ties back to your question. You know, if you're using it to try to transfer data across back and forth, I don't know if we're there yet. I think if you're, again, yeah.
That's the hidden cost of all.
Right.
Calculate.
The bandwidth, I mean, you're going to pay for bandwidth now. You know, if you need yeah. But again, I go back to, if you're, you know, who thought we would be sitting here and talking with iPads that they're replacing laptops now, right? So if you're building a service company that serves up data or information, why not go all over the cloud? I mean, why keep that database? You know, you were talking about sensitive data. Well, you know, that's what we were looking at was we have sensitive data too. We were only going to put the non-sensitive data out on the cloud. We were going to keep the sensitive data here with us because the data warehouse they really need certain to keep the information that is more sensitive. Yeah, that's another, and that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, if you've got what it is.
That's why we did.
Yeah, and that's right, and it can shift all the time behind the scenes, you don't even know. Yeah, I think there's some applications that this is for and some that it's not, but I don't know if it's right now. I just don't know if it's a good viable solution. You know, I mean, as an example, when I came from HealthSpring, we had a nice pipe between us and our other data center that we backed up. You know, you could send large amounts of data across all day long, and it didn't have any effect. Unless we start getting those kind of connections to these services, I think it's going to be tough to kind of fit those. But I'm not saying it's impossible. I just don't know if it really is. Right. I mean, one other thing I want to mention too. Right now, Azure only goes up to 150 gigs of database size. Yeah. So see, in some of these cases, that's what I'm saying. You know, they're not there yet, but they're getting there. And again, I think even just the announcement of Oracle and Microsoft deciding to work together, you know, is huge. I mean, that says a lot. That says that Amazon is what they're doing is not wrong. And you know, whether this becomes the shift that was like the shift between, say, you know, mainframes to Windows and so forth, where we're now, that may not be the same shift. But again, I just kind of wanted to open this up and kind of get people thinking about it. And I think if we can get some more classes or sessions, even if maybe dive a little deeper into some of the technologies, it just gives us something else in our, you know, marketability. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, we got a few drawings. Oh, got you.
I've got two books, and I've got a nice little impact from our friend Sio, Fuse.io. The thing I ask is there's a USB drive in there. Take a minute and look at it and kind of their points.
Don't format it first.
Don't format it. If a tracking device in there, they'll let you down.
Yeah, it's a great EXE you should install on it.
They're pretty cool. They are really good sponsors. So. And if anybody's going back downtown, they just get word from my office that Princeton Second Street are closed.
But rides on the Ferris wheel are free.
Nothing's bad. The sponsors there are free too.
Which is actually true, right? Yeah. Did this come as you mean first come, first serve?
Sure.
Okay. Chris Hewitt. All right. Yeah, come on down. This price is right.
Yeah. You can have high performance C2. You can move your function and integration
Or the
Impact.
Jack Cannon? Show. That's it? Okay. Okay. All right. Sure? Okay. Rick Wells. And Eugene Tobacco. Thanks, guys. We do a storage management as well, and present that to the storage management. It's about the same people, but they're all kind of, yeah, it's good. They're all kind of cued into this kind of stuff. I mean, they're more, of course, private cloud type people, and same people. But yeah, that'd be a good one. It'd be a good one because they're all kind of hybrid, hybrid out there. That'd be like downside. Yeah, so we're going big in the cloud.
Are you? Okay.
We built what we call limited labs.
Yeah.
Our 300 gig production databases and stuff. We limit down to like 7 gig. And we move those up to the template on the cloud, and then if we need to spin new project labs and stuff, we spin right up there.
Okay. Wow. See, AWS. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, well, it is. He's going to control the world, so it's like a drug deal. Everyone's going to get on. I own you.
I know.
So the prices will go down.
Yeah.
You lost.
Well, they got. Because I need to save it somewhere, right?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. If you're doing it to the surface, then it's
Oh, it should be okay.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh.